I was mocked for being just a waitress at my ex's wedding. Then everyone watched in disbelief. It was a quiet Thursday evening when Samantha opened her mailbox after finishing her shift at the local cafe. Among the usual stack of bills and coupons, a thick, glossy envelope caught her eye. Her fingers trembled slightly as she slid her thumb beneath the seal, revealing a gold-embossed wedding invitation. Her breath caught the moment she read the names Ethan and Melissa. Ethan, her ex-boyfriend. The man she once thought she'd spend her life with. Her chest tightened as memories of their years together flooded back, memories she had spent years burying. It was surreal. She hadn't heard from Ethan since their painful breakup 3 years ago when he left her, claiming she lacked ambition. And now, an invitation. To his wedding. The invitation wasn't just a surprise, it felt like a cruel joke from the universe. Samantha stared at the RSVP card, her heart pounding in her chest. What did he expect her to do? Politely decline and pretend it didn't sting? Or show up, smile, and watch the man she once loved marry someone else? The worst part wasn't Ethan, it was Melissa. Samantha had met her once, briefly. Beautiful, confident, and from a wealthy family, Melissa represented everything Samantha wasn't. Back then, she dismissed it as harmless insecurity, but now, staring at the elegant cardstock, a question gnawed at her: was this invitation an olive branch, or a reminder of what she'd lost? The next few days were torture. Samantha couldn't focus at work, her mind spinning with 1,000 scenarios. Every latte she made, every plate she delivered at the cafe, her thoughts circled back to that invitation. Was it foolish to even consider going? Wouldn't it be humiliating to stand there among successful, polished people, watching her ex pledge his life to someone who had everything she didn't? But another voice inside her whispered louder. Maybe this wasn't about them. Maybe it was about her, proving to herself that she wasn't the fragile, broken woman they thought she was. Her best friend, Olivia, noticed the tension brewing beneath Samantha's usually calm demeanor. After closing the cafe one night, Olivia sat her down. "Sam, why are you even considering going? You don't owe him anything." Samantha sighed, running her fingers through her long brown hair. "It's not about Ethan. It's about me walking in there, holding my head high, and showing that I'm not ashamed of where I am. That I'm not less than anyone." Olivia frowned but nodded. "If that's really how you feel, then make them remember you. Not as Ethan's ex, but as Samantha. The woman who never gave up." The morning of the wedding arrived faster than Samantha expected. As she stood in front of her small closet, doubt surged through her. Nothing she owned screamed elegance, wealth, or success. But after hours of deliberation, she chose a simple navy blue dress. Modest but flattering, paired with a delicate silver necklace her late grandmother had gifted her. Staring at her reflection, she took a deep breath. Her appearance wasn't flashy, but it was honest, just like her. The drive to the hotel venue felt like an eternity. Her palms gripped the steering wheel tighter with every passing mile. The luxury hotel towered in front of her as she pulled into the valet. Expensive cars lined the entrance, sleek black sedans, exotic sports cars, and shiny luxury SUVs. As she stepped out of her modest hatchback, a valet barely concealed his raised eyebrow before handing her a ticket. Her stomach churned as she walked toward the grand ballroom entrance, each step echoing louder in her ears. This was it. No turning back now. The moment Samantha stepped through the grand double doors of the ballroom, she felt the weight of 100 eyes scanning her. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings twice as high as her apartment. Velvet drapes framed enormous floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Waiters in tuxedos floated gracefully with silver trays of champagne. Conversations hummed throughout the room, blending with the soft melodies of a string quartet in the corner. She could feel the judgment without anyone uttering a word. Women draped in silk gowns gave her quick up and down glances before turning to whisper behind manicured hands. Men in tailored suits barely acknowledged her, eyes sweeping past like she didn't exist. Samantha forced her shoulders back and walked further in. This wasn't her world, never had been. But she was here now, whether anyone liked it or not. Her eyes scanned the crowd, catching familiar faces from years ago, people who once knew her but now pretended not to. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a battlefield masked in polite smiles. As Samantha made her way toward the refreshment table, conversations shifted subtly. "Is that her?" someone whispered from behind a column. "I think so. Didn't she used to date Ethan, before he, upgraded?" A stifled giggle followed. Samantha pretended not to hear, but the sting was sharp. Another woman muttered, "She's brave to show up dressed like that." Samantha inhaled deeply, gripping her champagne flute tighter. Every fiber of her wanted to turn and snap back, but she wouldn't. Not yet. The worst was yet to come. As she passed a group gathered near the dessert table, a man chuckled under his breath. "She still works at that little cafe downtown, right?" Another voice chimed in, dripping with fake sympathy. "Oh, how quaint. Maybe she's working the event." Samantha's throat tightened, but she bit it back. These people saw her as a failure, a relic of Ethan's less successful past. But what they didn't know was that behind the apron they mocked stood a very different woman, one they were about to meet. As Samantha carefully navigated the room, trying to avoid further humiliation, a familiar voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Melissa sneered, her arms crossed tightly over her designer gown. Her eyes scanned Samantha from head to toe with a look of barely disguised contempt. "I didn't realize the catering staff was allowed to mingle with the guests." Her words were loud enough for nearby guests to hear, and a ripple of laughter followed. Samantha clenched her fists but forced herself to stay composed. "I'm here as a guest," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Melissa's lips curled into a smug grin. "A guest? Oh, darling, this is a high-class event. You should know better. People like you don't belong in places like this." The condescension wasn't subtle, it was a full-on attack. Samantha could feel dozens of eyes turning toward her, waiting to see how she would react. Before Samantha could speak, Melissa leaned in closer, whispering with venom, "Ethan was always meant for more, someone better. You were just a stepping stone." Her words stung, but something inside Samantha snapped, not in anger, but in resolve. Her breathing slowed, and her spine straightened. If this was how they wanted to play it, then fine. Let them underestimate her. Minutes later, as Samantha approached the champagne table to collect herself, another wave of humiliation was already brewing. She reached for a flute, but before her fingers could wrap around it, Melissa's shrill voice echoed again. "Careful," she exclaimed loudly. "Wouldn't want you to spill it like you spilled your future." Her comment earned a round of stifled laughter from a cluster of bridesmaids standing nearby. Samantha paused, feeling the heat rise to her cheeks. She turned, locking eyes with Melissa, who wore a gleeful, satisfied smile. The kind of smile people wear when they know they've won. For a moment, Samantha considered walking out. Was this really worth enduring? But then, her mind flashed back to why she came. She came to prove that her worth wasn't tied to a dress, a bank account, or someone else's opinion. Taking a slow, deliberate sip of the champagne, Samantha straightened her posture and said calmly, "Thanks for your concern, but I don't spill things. Not anymore." Her voice was steady, confident, enough to make Melissa blink in surprise. But even as Samantha walked away, the laughter lingered, buzzing like a swarm of wasps in her ears. Hoping to escape the toxic tension, Samantha scanned the room for familiar faces, faces of old friends, people she'd once laughed with, shared memories with. But as her eyes met theirs, they quickly looked away, pretending to be suddenly engrossed in meaningless conversations. A few offered awkward smiles that vanished just as fast as they appeared. It was as though her presence was an inconvenience they'd rather not acknowledge. One former friend, Danielle, whom Samantha had once considered like a sister, caught her gaze. For a brief second, Samantha thought she saw warmth, an old flicker of connection. But then Danielle turned her back, whispering something to the woman next to her, followed by muffled giggles. It was clear. No one here was willing to be seen talking to the waitress ex. Their silence hurt more than Melissa's words. It was the silence of betrayal. Samantha forced a weak smile as she made her way toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. She wasn't sure what stung more, the cruelty of strangers or the cold rejection of people who once claimed to care about her. Either way, it was a piercing reminder of how quickly people rewrite history when it's convenient for their image. Just as Samantha thought things couldn't get any more unbearable, a voice from behind stopped her in her tracks. "Sam?" Her breath caught. Turning slowly, she was face to face with Ethan. His eyes widened with a mixture of surprise and something that almost looked like guilt. Dressed in a sharp-tailored tuxedo, Ethan stood awkwardly, clearly not expecting to see her there. There was a heavy silence between them. For a brief second, it was as if the chaos of the wedding faded, and it was just the two of them, two people who once dreamed about building a life together. Ethan cleared his throat, glancing around nervously. "I didn't expect you to come," he said, scratching the back of his neck. His voice lacked the arrogance she heard in Melissa's. Instead, it was filled with discomfort. Samantha crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "Yeah, well. Neither did I." Her tone was sharper than she intended, but she didn't care. Ethan looked down, shuffling his feet, avoiding her gaze. "Look. I hope Melissa didn't say anything too, you know." His words trailed off because even he couldn't pretend ignorance. Samantha sighed, offering a bitter smile. "She said exactly what I expected. And you let it happen." As the guests gathered for the ceremonial toast, Samantha retreated toward the back of the room, hoping to remain unseen. Glasses clinked as Ethan took center stage with Melissa by his side, her diamond-studded grin beaming at the crowd. "To love," Ethan began, lifting his glass, "and to moving forward, and never settling for less than what we deserve." His gaze, whether intentional or not, flickered in Samantha's direction. The crowd erupted in polite applause, but Samantha's fingers tightened around her champagne glass. She could feel the sting of his words, not just the words themselves, but the underlying message woven beneath them. Melissa leaned into the microphone, her voice sweet but laced with poison. "To finding the right person, someone who's your equal, someone who shares your ambitions." Laughter sprinkled through the air like confetti, but it felt heavier than bricks to Samantha. Her jaw clenched, but she refused to let her face betray her emotions. Deep inside, something shifted. She realized she wasn't angry at them, not really. She was angry at herself. For years, she had allowed herself to believe that their opinions defined her worth. But standing there, surrounded by people dripping in wealth but empty in character, Samantha made a silent vow. They were about to learn exactly who she had become. As the applause faded, Samantha felt herself pulled into the past, the day everything fell apart. She had been sitting at the tiny kitchen table in their old apartment when Ethan looked her straight in the eye and said, "I need someone more ambitious. Someone who wants more from life than this." His words stabbed deeper than any knife. She remembered the lump in her throat, the way her heart fractured as he packed his things without a hint of regret. Back then, she blamed herself. She believed maybe he was right, maybe working at the cafe while dreaming of starting her own business wasn't enough. For weeks, she questioned every choice she had made, wondering if her dreams were too small, too naive. But over time, that heartbreak hardened into determination. She wouldn't let one man's shallow definition of success define her future. Even now, standing in a room full of judgmental faces, that memory burned as a reminder. A reminder that no one, not Ethan, not Melissa, not anyone, would ever have the power to make her feel worthless again. As her eyes swept the ballroom, she realized something shocking. Most of these people weren't laughing because they were happy. They were laughing because they were afraid of being seen as anything less than perfect. What no one in that room knew, what not even Ethan knew, was that Samantha had built something remarkable. After their breakup, she threw herself into her dream. She spent long nights studying, learning everything about event management, hospitality, and business operations. She took freelance gigs, managed birthday parties, retirement celebrations, and small corporate events, slowly building a reputation for excellence. Within 3 years, Samantha had founded Velvet Rose Events, an upscale event management company. Discreet, exclusive, and highly sought after. Her company handled luxury weddings, high-profile galas, and million-dollar corporate retreats. Her client list included CEOs, politicians, and celebrities. But Samantha never bragged. She stayed humble, never forgetting the taste of humiliation, nor the fire it ignited within her. Ironically, her love for working occasional shifts at the cafe never faded. It kept her grounded. To her, wearing an apron wasn't a symbol of failure, it was a reminder of where she started. The people in this room could laugh all they wanted. The truth was, most of them had probably attended events she had planned, without ever knowing the woman behind it all was the same waitress they now mocked. Just as the tension in the ballroom seemed to peak, a loud commotion erupted near the main table. The wedding planner, a young woman with a clipboard, suddenly collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Panic swept the room. Guests stood frozen, staring as waiters scrambled. Someone yelled, "Call 911," but no one moved. Melissa shrieked, "Do something," while Ethan fumbled, clueless. To make matters worse, the sound system shorted out with a loud pop, plunging the room into awkward silence broken only by whispers and rising panic. The cake table wobbled as an overworked waiter bumped into it, sending plates crashing to the floor. The staff was clearly unprepared. Melissa's face turned crimson as she stomped her foot, yelling at anyone within reach. "Where is the planner? Where is she?" Samantha watched as chaos spread like wildfire. Waiters forgot their tasks, guests complained loudly, and the perfectly curated image of a flawless wedding began crumbling. It was ironic. For all the wealth in the room, no one had a clue how to handle a crisis. Melissa screeched again, "This is a disaster. Fix it! Somebody fix it!" But no one had an answer. Except Samantha. For a split second, the entire ballroom stood in stunned silence, an eerie, suffocating pause where no one knew what to do next. Then, as if on cue, the panic exploded. Guests rose from their tables, some arguing with servers, others demanding refunds or threatening to leave. A group of bridesmaids tried fanning the collapsed planner, while Ethan stood like a statue, mumbling helplessly to himself. Melissa, still consumed with rage, barked orders at anyone who made eye contact. "Get the DJ! Where's the backup sound? Where's the kitchen manager? Why isn't the dessert table set?" But it was clear, the staff was in complete disarray. Half of them didn't speak enough English to follow her frantic commands, and the others looked one step away from quitting on the spot. Samantha stood quietly, her arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold. Part of her felt a surge of satisfaction, a bitter, quiet sense of justice. But the other part, the professional, the woman who had dedicated years to mastering the art of crisis management, felt something else entirely. Instinct. This was what she was trained for. She knew exactly what needed to be done. And whether these people deserved her help or not, it didn't matter. This was her stage now. Melissa spun around, her hair whipping behind her like a warning flag. "Why isn't anyone doing anything?" she shrieked. Her voice cracked, teetering between rage and desperation. Ethan muttered, I don't know, the planner handled all this," a bridesmaid snapped, "she's unconscious, genius." The guests started murmuring, some already gathering their things to leave. The perfect wedding was seconds away from total collapse. No one noticed Samantha. Or rather, no one considered that the woman they'd spent the last hour mocking might be the only person in the room capable of saving the day. Her mind raced through checklists, exactly what to do, who to call, how to reset the entire event flow in under 15 minutes. But she hesitated for a moment, debating whether she should let this disaster unfold as poetic justice. Then her gaze fell on the planner, still lying on the floor, overwhelmed and pale. Samantha sighed. This wasn't about Melissa, Ethan, or the snobbish guests anymore. This was about doing what was right. Straightening her shoulders, she stepped forward, her voice clear, commanding, and calm. "All right, everyone needs to step back. I'll handle this." And just like that, every head in the ballroom turned to her. The room fell silent, stunned by the confidence in Samantha's voice. For a moment, no one moved. Melissa blinked, her mouth slightly open as if unsure whether to laugh or scream. "You?" she finally scoffed. "A waitress?" Her tone dripped with disbelief, but her eyes betrayed something else, fear. The kind of fear that comes when you realize the person you've underestimated might actually hold the answers you desperately need. Ignoring her, Samantha pulled her phone from her clutch. Her fingers flew across the screen, dialing a number she knew by heart. "Hey, Mason. Emergency. I need a full crew, sound, lighting, kitchen support, everything. Location? Grand Rail Hotel, Ballroom A, ETA?" A pause. "Perfect. 10 minutes." As she hung up, she turned to the nearest waiter. "Start clearing the broken dishes now. Quietly. Keep guests away from that area." Melissa crossed her arms, laughing nervously as though trying to regain control. "This is ridiculous. She's bluffing." But the murmurs among the guests grew louder, curious, even hopeful. Ethan opened his mouth to protest but said nothing, realizing that neither he nor anyone else had any better ideas. Samantha stood taller, scanning the room with the sharp, analytical eyes of someone who had done this 100 times before. Melissa finally snapped, bursting into loud, incredulous laughter. "This is insane," she said, shaking her head as if trying to shake off the nightmare unfolding. "Is this some kind of joke? You seriously expect us to believe you can fix this? What are you going to do, bring out more breadsticks?" Her cruel giggle echoed, but it was brittle, the laugh of someone clinging to their last shred of superiority. Samantha didn't flinch. Instead, she walked right past Melissa, completely ignoring her, and approached the front-of-house staff, who looked like they were one spilled drink away from walking out. "I need the dessert station reorganized. Move it closer to the windows. Shift the drinks table to the left wall. Clear a path through the center. Go. Now." Her tone wasn't asking, it was commanding. Melissa tried to intercept her, placing herself in Samantha's path. "No, no. You don't get to," but Samantha leveled her with a look so calm, so unwavering, that even Melissa faltered. "You want a ruined wedding, or you want me to fix it? Choose." The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa clenched her jaw but said nothing, realizing she was rapidly losing control, not just of the wedding, but of the entire room. Just as tension threatened to erupt again, the grand ballroom doors opened with a sharp thud. A team of uniformed professionals stormed in, sound engineers hauling equipment, kitchen staff wheeling in carts, and a lighting technician adjusting cables as he walked. At the front was Mason, a tall, sharp-eyed man in a navy blazer, nodding toward Samantha. "We're here. Where do you want us?" The guests gasped. A woman near the entrance whispered, Who is she?" as people craned their necks to watch. Melissa's face drained of color as realization started to creep in. Samantha didn't bother answering the murmurs. She pointed. "Sound station here. Lights set to a warm tone, focus on the floral arrangements. Mason, check the kitchen. Prioritize hot dishes. Get the cake stabilized." Even Ethan stood frozen, watching this new version of Samantha. Gone was the quiet, unsure girl he had left behind. This woman was authoritative, efficient, and in total command. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He didn't even know who she was anymore, or maybe, he realized bitterly, he never really did. The whispers grew louder, now tinged with confusion and awe. "Wait, who called these people?" someone asked near the dessert table. "She did," another responded, pointing discreetly at Samantha. "But, how?" A guest pulled out their phone, curiosity getting the better of them, and searched Samantha's name. Within seconds, gasps rippled through the crowd. "Oh my God, she owns Velvet Rose Events." The name hit like a thunderclap. Guests murmured, sharing the revelation faster than wildfire. "You mean that Velvet Rose? The one that did the Henderson Gala?" someone exclaimed. "And the mayor's anniversary event," another added. The realization dawned on them all. The woman they mocked was the owner of one of the most prestigious event management companies in the city. Melissa, standing rigidly, watched her perfectly curated social facade begin to unravel. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hands trembled slightly, clutching her bouquet like it was the last anchor in her sinking ship. Ethan, standing nearby, ran a hand through his hair, his eyes dark with something between regret and disbelief. This wasn't just humiliation, it was a reckoning. As Mason's team worked swiftly to stabilize the chaos, Samantha stood in the center of the ballroom, issuing instructions with the grace of someone completely in her element. Her movements were precise, her voice clear, and the panic that once filled the room slowly dissolved into an organized hum of efficiency. The The catering staff, once frazzled and lost, now followed her lead as if they had worked with her for years. The irony was delicious. For years, Samantha had chosen to work the occasional shift at her friend's cafe, not because she needed the money, but because it reminded her of where she started. She loved the simplicity of it, the grounding feeling of serving coffee or clearing plates. What others saw as failure, she saw as humility, a reminder that no job was beneath her, and no amount of success would ever make her forget her roots. The guests, who had only minutes ago whispered behind their hands, now watched in stunned silence. The same people who dismissed her as a failure were witnessing something undeniable. Samantha wasn't some forgotten ex or struggling waitress. She was a powerhouse. A woman who rose from heartbreak and humiliation to become someone unstoppable. And now, everyone knew it. As the event slowly returned to order, the guests continued to whisper, some glancing between their phones and Samantha with stunned expressions. One woman leaned toward her husband and muttered, "Why was she even working at a cafe?" The man shook his head in disbelief. Samantha overheard, and for the first time that night, a genuine smile crossed her lips. They would never understand. To them, working with your hands was failure. To her, it was freedom. Samantha had always believed that success didn't have to disconnect her from reality. Her decision to help her best friend at the cafe wasn't out of necessity, it was about humility. It reminded her of where she came from, kept her grounded amidst the million-dollar contracts and demanding clients. It was her way of staying human in a world obsessed with appearances. Money could never replace authenticity. She didn't need designer gowns or flashy cars to validate her. Her real wealth was her resilience, her independence, and her ability to walk into any room, whether a small coffee shop or the grandest ballroom, and know her worth. While these people spent fortunes pretending to be important, Samantha lived her truth unapologetically. Tonight, they were finally seeing it, whether they liked it or not. Ethan stood stiffly at the edge of the room, watching Samantha orchestrate the entire event like a maestro commanding an orchestra. His throat tightened as he watched her stride confidently across the ballroom, adjusting flower arrangements, calming panicked staff, and redirecting guests with a grace that was both powerful and effortless. His mind spun with memories of their past, of her supporting his dreams, of her believing in him when no one else did. He felt an overwhelming surge of regret. Back then, he thought she wasn't ambitious enough. He thought her dreams were too small, too simple. But watching her now, he realized how blind he had been. She hadn't lacked ambition, she had just defined success differently. And in truth, it was him who had lacked the vision to see her for who she truly was. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water. The lump in his throat was impossible to swallow. The woman he once dismissed as not enough was now the only person holding together the most important day of his life. And for the first time in years, Ethan realized that letting her go had been the greatest mistake of his life. Melissa stood frozen near the head table, gripping the edge of a chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her flawless makeup no longer masked the sheer panic spreading across her face. A bridesmaid cautiously showed her Samantha's company website on her phone. The headline alone was enough to make her dizzy: Velvet Rose Events, Luxury Redefined. Beneath it, articles about Samantha graced magazines and blogs she frequently bragged about reading. No. No way, Melissa stammered, her eyes darting around as though searching for an escape. The weight of the humiliation hit her like a tidal wave. The same woman she had belittled, mocked as a mere waitress, was the very person she now depended on to save her wedding from total ruin. Every cruel comment, every smirk, every dig now boomeranged back with brutal force. Melissa tried to compose herself, adjusting her veil with shaking hands. But the guests had already seen the truth. The judgment in their eyes had shifted, no longer aimed at Samantha, but at her. Her perfect day had turned into a nightmare, and the worst part was knowing she had caused it herself. Her carefully curated image shattered, leaving her exposed in the most humiliating way possible. "Wait." "Samantha," Melissa finally managed to say, her voice cracking under the strain. She approached cautiously, her earlier arrogance replaced with desperation. "Look. I didn't realize. I mean, obviously, I didn't know who you were." Her voice faltered as Samantha turned slowly, raising an eyebrow with cool detachment. "You were saying?" Samantha asked, folding her arms. Melissa swallowed hard, lowering her gaze for the first time. "Please. I need your help. The wedding, it's falling apart." The tremble in her voice was unmistakable. The same woman who mocked her for being beneath her was now begging. I shouldn't have said those things earlier. I didn't mean them," Melissa added, her words stumbling over each other in her frantic attempt to save face. Samantha studied her for a moment. There was a time when she might have felt satisfaction in watching Melissa squirm. But now, it just felt sad. This wasn't about revenge. It was about showing, without words, that character always outshines privilege. Samantha sighed softly. "I'm already fixing it," she said calmly. "Not for you, but because that's what professionals do." Samantha clapped her hands together sharply. "All right. Let's move," she commanded, her voice slicing through the chaos. Her team jumped into action with practiced precision. The floral designers swooped in to repair the centerpiece displays. The lighting crew recalibrated the fixtures, casting a warm glow over the ballroom, masking the earlier disarray. The sound system came alive again, smooth jazz filling the air as if the interruption had never happened. In the kitchen, Mason coordinated a complete reorganization, bringing order to what had been moments away from collapse. Fresh trays of hors d'oeuvres emerged. The cake, which had been perilously close to toppling, was carefully repositioned and stabilized. Guests, who had been seconds from leaving, now found themselves smiling, chatting, and sipping champagne, as though the disaster had never occurred. Samantha walked through the room, double-checking every detail, answering questions from her team, guiding the overwhelmed hotel staff, and addressing guests with polite, reassuring nods. The woman they mocked had transformed into the heartbeat of the event. Without her, the wedding would have been a complete failure. And now, everyone in the room knew it beyond a shadow of a doubt. As the evening settled back into a graceful rhythm, the atmosphere shifted entirely. Where there was once judgment and mockery, now there was admiration and awe. Guests leaned toward one another, whispering not about the bride's gown or the extravagant decor but about Samantha. "She's incredible," someone muttered near the bar. "Did you see how she just took over? Like she owns the place." Another nodded, wide-eyed. "She basically does. Velvet Rose, that's her company." Even the hotel staff, initially overwhelmed, now followed Samantha's lead as if she were their manager. The way she coordinated the logistics, addressed minor crises without missing a beat, and seamlessly turned chaos into perfection was something no one could deny. The earlier laughter and gossip about her waitress job had all but disappeared, replaced by subtle nods of respect as she walked past. Samantha noticed the shift but remained focused. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. This was simply what she did, her craft, her purpose. She moved gracefully from table to table, making subtle adjustments, greeting guests politely, and ensuring every detail aligned perfectly. Every action was a quiet but powerful reminder. True value isn't worn on the outside, it's demonstrated in what you build, what you lead, and who you become. Ethan found himself drifting towards Samantha, driven by a mixture of guilt and admiration. His hands trembled slightly as he approached her near the stage, where she was reviewing the lighting setup. "Sam," he began, his voice softer than she had heard it in years. She turned, her expression neutral but not hostile. "Yes?" she asked, as if he were just another vendor needing direction. He swallowed hard, struggling to meet her eyes. I owe you an apology," he said, his voice strained. "For everything. For the things I said, for not seeing you. Who you are. Who you've become." His words hung heavy between them. The arrogance he once wore like armor was gone, stripped bare by the undeniable truth of who she had become in his absence. Samantha held his gaze for a long moment. "You didn't see it because you weren't looking," she replied calmly. "But that's not my burden to carry." Her words weren't cruel, they were matter-of-fact, honest, and firm. Ethan lowered his head, nodding, the weight of his mistake sinking in fully. In that moment, he realized that the woman he once left behind was someone he could never reach again. Melissa stood stiffly by the main table, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The chatter among guests shifted, and though no one said it directly to her, she felt it. She wasn't the center of attention anymore. The radiant bride everyone had come to admire now stood in the shadow of the woman she had spent the entire evening mocking. Her grip tightened around her bouquet, her fingers digging into the silk ribbon. Everywhere she looked, people were either whispering about Samantha or openly praising how the night had been saved. The compliments that should have been hers, about how elegant the wedding was, how perfect the reception turned out, were all being redirected. And worse, there was nothing she could do to change it. Her perfect fairy tale had been hijacked by reality, and reality had Samantha's name written all over it. Melissa tried to recover, walking table to table with her plastic smile, thanking guests for coming. But every time her eyes caught Samantha commanding the room, a fresh wave of humiliation washed over her. The wedding was no longer about the bride and groom. It was about the undeniable presence of the woman they underestimated, and now, everyone knew it. As the final course was served and the band struck up its closing song, the atmosphere was vibrant, lively, and filled with laughter, the kind of laughter that only comes after witnessing something extraordinary. The guests were relaxed, sipping champagne, dancing, and enjoying themselves, oblivious to the earlier disaster. To them, this wedding would go down as one of the most elegant they had attended. At the center of it all stood Samantha, speaking quietly with Mason and her team, confirming the final checks before wrapping up. As the last song faded, the guests broke into applause, not for the couple, but for the event itself. Several guests even approached Samantha, offering their compliments. "If I ever get married, I'm hiring you," one woman gushed. "You saved the entire night." Ethan and Melissa stood off to the side, watching this unfold in stunned silence. They had dreamed of being the stars of the evening, but reality had other plans. Samantha didn't need to say a word. Her presence, her professionalism, and the way she turned a sinking ship into a flawless event spoke louder than anything she could have ever said. She hadn't just salvaged a wedding, she had redefined it. As the night wound down and the guests slowly filtered out, Samantha stood for a moment at the grand ballroom doors, looking over the space she had just transformed. Where others saw disaster, she had seen an opportunity. Not for revenge, not for validation, but simply to prove to herself, once again, that no matter how others tried to define her, only she held the pen. With her head held high, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. She passed by groups of guests who now looked at her with admiration, some even parting to give her space as though instinctively recognizing her strength. Gone was the awkward girl who once questioned her worth. This was a woman who had faced humiliation head-on, and left standing taller than anyone else in the room. As the valet brought around her modest car, the same one that had earned her scorn earlier in the evening, Samantha smiled. Not because she had shown them who she was, but because she never needed their approval to begin with. Her worth wasn't tied to their opinions, their wealth, or their expectations. Her worth was, and always had been, something far greater, something entirely her own.